5-minute bedtime Bible stories, retold by Amy Parker. A boy, a giant, and an almighty God. 1 Samuel chapter 17. Deep in the valley, between the hills, two armies met for battle. On one hill, the Philistine army gathered. On the other hill, King Saul stood with God's people, the Israelites. They were all lined up, ready to fight. Just then, a giant stepped down from among the Philistines. He walked into the valley and stood between the two armies. The giant was more than 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet on his head. Scaly bronze armor covered his chest and wrapped around the bottom of his legs, and he carried a long bronze javelin.
"I am the mighty Goliath," the giant roared. "I will fight for the Philistines."
Goliath looked at the Israelites up on the hill.
"Send someone down to fight me," he shouted.
The Israelites trembled in fear. They didn't have any men as big as Goliath, not even close. And if the Israelites couldn't defeat the giant, the Philistines would win the battle. The Israelites didn't know what to do, so they hid in their camp. Every morning, Goliath stepped down into the valley and called the Israelites out to fight.
"Send someone down to fight me," the giant shouted.
And every morning, the Israelites listened in fear. Meanwhile, many miles away, a man named Jesse filled large bags with cheeses and grain. Jesse had 8 sons. His 7 oldest sons were soldiers for King Saul. They were part of the Israelite army on the hill. His youngest son, David, was a shepherd to their sheep. "David," Jesse said to his son, "please take this food to your brothers." So David set out with the food and went to find his brothers. He found his brothers in the valley with the rest of King Saul's army. But as soon as he met them, all attention turned to the other side of the valley.
"Come on, you Israelites! Don't you have anyone to fight me?"
Goliath's voice boomed across the land. David watched the Israelite army scatter and shake with fear. "Who does this guy think he is?" young David asked the soldiers around him. "He should know better than to threaten the army of the Almighty God. I'll fight him." "Now, David," his big brother said, "do you think that because you take care of sheep, you can handle a giant? Don't come down here causing trouble. You'll get hurt." But other Israelites had heard what David said, and someone ran to tell King Saul that maybe there was an Israelite who would face the terrible giant. King Saul sent for David to see for himself.
"You?"
the king asked when David came to him.
"You are willing to fight Goliath?"
"Yes, I will fight him," David told the king. "Don't let this giant scare you." King Saul looked at the boy in front of him. He knew that David wouldn't stand a chance against the growling, rugged, 9-foot-tall warrior waiting in the valley. "David," King Saul began, You cannot fight Goliath. He has been a Philistine soldier for many years. He has fought many battles, and you are just a boy." "I keep watch over my father's sheep," David answered quickly. "And whenever a lion comes for the sheep, I save the sheep right out of the lion's mouth. The same God who has kept me safe from the lion will rescue me from this Philistine giant." "Very well," the king answered. "May God be with you as you face Goliath." Then King Saul gave David the best armor that he had, the king's own armor. David put on the armor, but when he tried to walk, he slumped and stumbled. "I can't wear this," David said, pulling off the helmet. "It's too heavy, and I'm not used to wearing armor." David removed the armor and picked up his shepherd's stick. The king watched in wonder as the boy walked off to face the giant. At a nearby stream, David carefully chose 5 smooth stones. He put the stones in his bag, and he went out to meet Goliath. David walked down into the valley carrying his sling. He looked up at the 9-foot-tall giant towering above him. He gulped. His heart was beating hard in his chest. Suddenly Goliath spoke to him.
"What am I, a dog?"
he bellowed.
"Do you really think you can fight me with that little stick?"
Young David looked the huge warrior in the eye. He spoke up the best he could. "You may come at me with your sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord." The giant didn't flinch. Instead, he lunged toward David. David had to do something fast, so he rushed toward Goliath. The boy reached into his bag, wrapping his fingers around a cool, smooth stone. He placed the stone into his sling, and he launched the stone up into the air. Whoosh! Pow! Thud! Down came the giant. The armies on both sides of the valley froze. No one moved. David stood, looking down at the giant lying on the ground. Everyone knew that God had helped David win the battle that day. Only God could make a young shepherd boy stand taller than the largest giant in the land.